Hi, and welcome to today's Biznology Digital Marketing webinar. I'm Mike Moran. I'm the founder of Biznology and a senior strategist at Conversion, Revealed Context and Solo Segment. I'm the co-author of Search Engine Marketing Inc. and Outside In Marketing, and sole author of Do It Wrong Quickly. I'm a veteran of IBM, managing groups at IBM.com for 8 years and retiring from IBM in 2008 as a distinguished engineer. Today, you'll be hearing from Paul Gillen, who will represent a tech journalist on the 5 best and worst practices of B2B PR. But before we start, we need to recognize our sponsors. Barn Raisers, a full-service digital and social media solutions company that builds brands using proven relationship principles and ROI. Gagalamp empowers companies to amplify their social media content by leveraging employees, partners, and resellers. Try Gagalamp for free today. Garris Corp, a full-service digital strategy firm that reaches deeper into the conversation than any other agency anywhere. Mountaintop Data is a B2B marketing intelligence company providing marketing lists as well as data cleaning, data appending, and data maintenance services. Paul Gillen Communications. Paul is a popular speaker and award-winning author who can define the value and the pitfalls of social media in plain business terms. Solo Segment, your one-stop shop for targeted B2B content marketing techniques, including website search and website personalization. As we wait for more attendees to join, let's review the format of our webinar. Our Biznology webinars last just 30 minutes. You can easily fit them into your busy schedule. We record each webinar, and we'll email you that link later this week. During our presentation, you can use Big Marker to chat with your fellow attendees. Just type in the Chat tab. There you can also see tweets about our webinar. Feel free to tweet with the hashtag BizNoWebinar. If you have a question to ask our speaker, click the Q&A tab. I'll select a few questions at the end of our webinar and pose them to Paul. Lastly, in the Handouts tab, you can find a PDF of today's presentation. Thanks again to all of you for spending 30 minutes with us. We know how valuable your time is, so let's introduce today's speaker. Paul Gillen is one of our authors at Biznology and principal at Paul Gillen Communications. He's an author and strategic advisor whose books, speeches, and hundreds of published articles have helped demystify social media for audiences across a wide range of industries. He's also a veteran technology journalist who anchors enterprise technology coverage at the IT news site SiliconANGLE. So if you've ever struggled with getting the attention of a journalist, this is the webinar for you. Paul, take it away.
Thank you very much, Mike. I'm going to skip ahead to this slide. Thank you for joining us today. Some of you may know me from previous Biznology webcasts I've delivered, or for other sponsors as well. I've focused much of my efforts on social media over the last few years, but previous to that and currently, a lot of my work was also in tech journalism. I was at Computer World for 15 years as a writer, as an editor-in-chief, and was the founding editor of Tech Target, a technology publisher. And currently, for the last 3 years, I've been a part-time enterprise editor for SiliconANGLE, which is a technology news site that targets primarily enterprise IT buyers. So this is something that's very deep in my background and sort of runs in my blood. This topic of what PR people are good at and not so good at is something that I've talked about a lot. I want to be sure that this is a positive session, because often I find in listening to sessions like this at conferences that it becomes PR bashing, and that's really not my intention. I work with many fine PR people, and many of my best friends are PR people. I do want to highlight the good things they do as well as the bad. On the other hand, you can take the inverse of each of these 5 topics, these 5 points that I'm going to make, and the inverse of the bad is the good, and vice versa. So these really are 10 things that PR people do that I love or don't love so much. So let's jump right into it. Doing research for me. Journalists are very, very busy these days. You know, I remember the days when a reporter was expected to turn out maybe one 750-word story a day. Those days are long gone. Many reporters are now writing 3, 4, 5 stories a day. They're tweeting, they're picking their own photos, they're writing their own headlines, and it's a much more pressurized business. When you can do your research for me, you're saving me a lot of time. You're doing me a favor, and that's going to impress upon my mind. So things like in your press release, including links to third-party research, a Gartner report, a Forrester report, an independent enterprise strategy group report that has data that can justify your company's, the business your company is in, is going to save me from having to go digging through that data. One PR person I particularly like works for eMarketer, which does a lot of research about different aspects of online marketing. He will send us prior to every earnings report, Twitter, Facebook, other social networks, other major online properties, he'll send us a rundown of their recent research on that company. And this is like gold for us because we don't have to go searching around looking for that data. It's current, it's relevant, and it's timely because it comes to us at least a day before the earnings report. If you can do something like that, anything you can build into your the press releases, the background materials that you send that can give us data that can help us to better understand the context of what you do is doing us a favor and making our lives easier. Finding a news hook. Now, there's a term called newsjacking that David Meerman Scott coined that I actually like. I think newsjacking, when done well, is a clever and an effective way to get your message in front of an audience. And that is to play upon a story that is in the news that day, whether it be a hack, whether it be something regarding government, whether it be a technology story, but some story that is trending that day and getting your client's point of view or something interesting, some interesting angle your client has in front of journalists that will help them to come up with a different angle, perhaps, on that story. And I say interesting because simply delivering a quote from your CEO or your head of marketing doesn't really help us. What does help us is if you can come up with a context, with an angle on that story that's different. Can you be a naysayer? Can you turn the argument on its head, going against the conventional wisdom, or simply coming at it from a different angle? That's going to help us because it gives us some original approach to that story that we didn't necessarily have. And by the way, when you do release the comments from your executives that are relevant to this meme, I recommend that you choose the most technical people, the people who have the best sort of technology chops and the best respect in their community, the people with the patents, the people with the research papers, the people whose opinion really is respected by members of the community. Not your chief marketing officer generally. It's more likely to be your chief product officer or one of your chief engineers. But this is very helpful to us when you can give us that hook. Coaching executives. When I go into an interview with an executive, you should know pretty much what questions I'm going to ask. If you know my audience, if you know something about my publication, you should know what angle I'm likely to take. Very often I find that executives haven't been coached to understand the person that they're talking to. So they deliver sort of a canned presentation, and that doesn't really help me to home in on the topic that's most of interest to the audience. So what I recommend you do is stage mock interviews with your executives. Even hire a journalist. There's lots of laid-off journalists out there. Hire a journalist to stage a mock interview over the phone with your executives. Come up with lines of questioning that the person is likely to encounter during an interview so that they won't be surprised or dumbstruck by a question that comes out of left field. It doesn't take long to do this, and I think your executives will appreciate it, knowing that they can go into interviews with confidence. I too often find that when I go into interviews with executives, they don't know who I am or what audience I represent, and so we spend a third of the time of the interviews just sort of circling around each other, trying to home in on the audience that they on what I'm interested in and the audience that I serve. So if you can prepare your executives in advance by giving them going through these mock interviews or giving them a series of questions that they're likely to encounter from the journalists, they're going to appreciate you because they are going to be better prepared. Just another note on coaching executives, keep slide presentations brief. The goal of a presentation, the goal of a meeting with a journalist should not be to get through the 30 slides in the PowerPoint. The goal should be to establish a connection, to give the journalist a story that has value, that's interesting and unique. The PowerPoints, my recommendation, keep PowerPoint decks under 10 minutes, under 10 slides if you're in a half-hour meeting. Beyond that, and think about those slides. Are those slides really delivering information or are they posturing? What we are going to appreciate most are the slides that give us the details about your product, about your technology, about your company, about the market that you work in, about your customers. We're not really interested in your awards or your position in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. That's not useful to us. We want to know the facts about your company and about the market. So narrow down that slide presentation to 8 to 10 slides that really are focused on the meat of the technology and the business that you're in. Number 4, shower me with images. And boy, this is something, I can't emphasize this enough. I was struck when I was out of tech journalism for about 6 or 7 years, doing something entirely different. When I got back in about 3 years ago, I expected that the format of the material that we would get from press people would be entirely different. It hadn't changed at all. What happens is I get a text press release sent to me, a Word doc or a PDF, and that's it, and I'm on my own from there. Now, we need images. You'll look at any news site today, and you will see that every story has an image with it. Why is that? It's because of Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter, and the fact that those social networks, when they pick up a URL, pick up the accompanying image as well. And that's because the reason we need those images is because we get higher readership when an image is associated with a headline. Yet I would say probably 90% of the press releases I get do not have any accompanying images at all, which means that I have to go scrounging for them. And most of the time, I'm going to wind up on a clip art site like Pixabay or Flickr Creative Commons, grabbing some marginally relevant image to go with the story. What a missed opportunity for you. You could give me a photo of the product. You could give me a chart showing how it works. You could give me information about your customers from a survey that you've run. Almost anything that is graphically compelling you could give me, and I'm likely to run that with the story rather than pick some clip art image. Yet very few press people I see bother to include any kind of graphical material at all. Finally, maintaining perspective, and that is knowing what's important and what's unimportant. One of my favorite PR people works for a big data company, and she asks me about 4 times a year to get on the phone with their executives, and I always do. And the reason is that she doesn't ask me for the other 70% of the press releases that she sends out. She doesn't ask for an interview with the executives because she understands that these press releases, this news isn't really all that interesting. So I get the press release, which is fine, but not the accompanying request for a meeting. That means that when she does ask for the meeting, I know that it's important, and it always is important, and I always take those meetings. So not every press release, not every announcement of a new channel partner is a reason to get a reporter on the phone. Look for the really big stuff, the stuff that matters to them. Send them the press releases for the other material, but don't try to make everything into a meeting opportunity. 5 things that PR people do that I hate. One is 11th hour press releases. Something else I don't understand, I do a lot of briefings. I do typically 8 to 10 briefings a week with companies. Often it's about new product or company-related funding information or something about that's changing about the company. Very often I don't get the press release until the meeting, until 5 to 10 minutes before the meeting, and sometimes not until after the meeting at all, which is a waste of time because then I'm spending my time just trying to figure out what the meeting is about. Or the press release has just arrived, I'm reading the press release while I'm speaking to the executive on the phone. I've had no time to formulate questions, to understand contextually what the topic is, and so we spend a third of the meeting just fumbling around trying to figure out what the question should be. You don't have to send me the final press release. You can send me a stub, you can send me an outline, something that's half written. I don't care. As long as you tell me what you're going to send me, I will treat it appropriately. But give me some background for the discussion we're going to have so that you don't waste your executive's time. Badgering. This is badgering both before and after the meeting. This is one annoying tactic that I get a lot is the person sending a second email after they've sent their first pitch mail. They send a second one 3 days later saying, I want to be sure you saw this. Well, I did see it. Because I see all the email that comes in. There are services that you can license very cheaply. Some are even for free that will tell you if I saw it. That will use a pixel image to tell you if I've opened that email. There's no reason for you to follow up to be sure I saw it because I did. I get 20 to 30, sometimes more press releases a day or press pitches a day. I can't respond to every one of them. I don't feel I am obliged to respond to everyone. I am obliged to read them, to make a decision about whether it's something I pursue, and then be done with it. I'm not obliged to explain my reasoning to you or to respond to your press release. So the fact that I haven't responded doesn't mean I haven't seen it. I'd much rather you use a service that will tell you when I've read your press release than to badger me with follow-ups. And the worst kind of badgering is the post-publication badgering. If I've gotten something wrong in the article, absolutely you should point it out to me and I will fix it. But coming back 3 and 4 times with minor changes, corrections, or because you differ with the way I characterize something, this happened to me a couple of months ago, where a company came back after I had published it was a relatively modest price product announcement. The company came back 3 times asking for changes to the article. 2 of those requests, one of them related to a fact, which is fine. I'm happy to correct a mistake. 2 of them related to the positioning of the product. I didn't use the terminology that they wanted me to use to describe it. And after the 3rd request for a change, I simply pulled the article down because I couldn't be bothered anymore with that kind of nitpicking. So be aware that particularly if you have a relationship with a journalist, if they responded to you in the past, they are getting your email. There's no reason to follow up with them again. And by the way, using the phone is something that I strongly discourage. Third item is keeping execs in the dark. And that is when you send an exec into a meeting with a journalist without understanding the reason the meeting is taking place, you're not doing your executive any favors. I do read pitch ideas that come in for trend stories. Somebody's got an interesting take on a technology trend, and often I will follow up and ask for an interview with the executive. And about half the time, I find out that when I get into that interview, the executive doesn't know why he or she is there. He doesn't know what we're supposed to talk about. He doesn't know what the pitch was. So he launches into a pitch for the product. It's another wasted opportunity. And it's not very good for me because I've come into that meeting thinking that we're going to talk about an interesting trend, and that executive has no idea that that's the pitch that was sent to me. So they do what comes naturally, which is launch into a product pitch. Make sure your executives know before they go into a meeting what the pitch was that brought the reporter into the meeting, and ideally some background on the reporter. It's not hard to find that information out these days. You know, we're all online. Our bios are all out there, and the lists of what we publish are out there. It should be simple to look at the recent stories we've published, look at the headlines at least, and understand what interests us, and look at the pitch letter to understand why we're there in the first place. Taking liberties with off the record. This is something that can ruin an otherwise productive meeting. When off the record means that there is a two-way agreement between you or the speaker and the journalist that this information is off the record. It's not unilateral. I find very often that executives think that off the record is unilateral. If they say this is off the record, then I'm supposed to honor that. Well, I'm not. I'm not supposed to honor it unless I agree to honor it, unless I say yes. This can have almost absurd consequences. I had one meeting recently with an executive who was confused about customer references, which were on and off the record. So the slide deck actually included a list of customers with a disclaimer at the top saying this list is off the record. Since I never agreed to that, I'm not obliged to honor it. But then during the meeting, the executive further said several times during the meeting, this executive said, now this is off the record, without getting my consent to that statement, which means I'm not obliged to honor it. And even more ridiculous was that the company later asked that I keep certain customer names out of the story, despite the fact that 2 of those customers were listed as references on their website. So this was a company that had no idea when it was going in to this meeting what to disclose and not to disclose. To be very clear, an embargo means in order for information to be embargoed, you must ask me to honor the embargo, and I must respond that I will honor the embargo. If you send me information and say that it's embargoed, I'm not obliged to hold to that unless I've agreed to in advance. If someone is talking to me, an executive is talking to me and says, this is off the record, it's not unless I respond, okay, it's off the record. So it's simple. It's a good way to keep yourself out of trouble, and it's a simple thing that your executives, I think, need to know. The pitch that never ends refers to pitches that just go on and on and on. As I said, I get 25, 30, 35 pitches a day. Ideally, pitches should max out at about 200 words. If you can't express an idea in 200 words, it probably needs to be pared down anyway. The pitches that never end, I've gotten pitch letters that have gone on for over 1,000 words. That's going to take me 5-6 minutes to read, and I don't have that kind of time during the day, especially when I didn't ask you for that pitch. So keep your pitches precise. State them in your subject line. Let me know when I open that email what I'm going to get, and then keep it to about 200 words or less. I'm much more likely to consider it if I don't have a river of text running in front of me, because many of those I simply throw away. So finally, to summarize, some 10 bits of friendly advice. Research and personalize. Understand who the journalists are that you're trying to pitch. It's not hard to do that these days. Our bios are all there. Our story lists are all there. You don't have to read our stuff in detail. 5 minutes of research will get you a pretty good idea of what that journalist cares about. Know my audience. My audience is, in my current assignment, is enterprise IT. It's not iPhone users. It's not gamers. So pitches that are intended for that audience are simply going to fall flat with me. Respect my time. I am very, very busy, and anything that you can do to make our interaction more efficient is something I will appreciate and will remember. Get to the point, 200 words maximum, accept no gracefully, please. Don't ask me for an explanation of why I didn't take you up on your pitch. I don't owe you that. It's a decision that I have to make, and I make dozens of those decisions every day. You may not agree with it, but that doesn't mean that's not going to change my mind. Brief your client so they know what they're getting into. Use facts, not hyperbole. Take a lot of the adverbs out of your press releases. Words like innovative and market leading, those mean nothing to me, and they're not going to make it into the story. Support your pitch with facts. Give me visuals. Don't call unless you absolutely have to. Hey, I remember I grew up during the age when everything was done by the phone. I would come back from lunch and there'd be 20 of those pink while you were out slips waiting for me, phone calls that had come in. We don't do business that way anymore because it sucked. It's much easier now. Now we have email. Email enables me to think about your pitch, to consider it, and to respond on a timely basis when it's convenient for me. When you call me out of the blue, you're interrupting me, you're forcing me to make decisions on the spot, which I'm not comfortable making, and frankly, just don't do it unless it's an absolute emergency. And with that, I'll hand it back to Mike if there are any questions that have come in.
Great stuff, Paul. I'm sure our attendees have a much stronger idea how to get the attention of journalists, but you didn't answer every question. I've got several good questions teed up for you, and I'd like to remind our audience that it's not too late to ask your own question by typing it into the Q&A tab. If your website search can improve your ROI, but you don't know where to start, Solo Segment has a special offer just for listeners to this webinar. The first 3 listeners to contact info@solosegment.com will receive 50% off the Site Search Inspector for their website for 6 months. You can immediately start tracking search metrics, plus you can give your team access to a knowledge base that tells them exactly what to do to improve those metrics. Email info@solosegment.com and tell them you are at the Biznology webinar to get your half-price discount while it lasts. If you're too late to be one of the first 3, you can still get 20% off by mentioning the webinar. We're about to start firing questions at Paul, but we need to thank our sponsors once again. Barn Raisers, a full-service digital and social media solutions company that builds brands using proven relationship principles and ROI. Gagalamp empowers companies to amplify their social media content by leveraging employees, partners, and resellers. Try Gagalamp for free today. Garris Corp, a full-service digital strategy firm that reaches deeper into the conversation than any other agency anywhere. Mountaintop Data is a B2B marketing intelligence company providing marketing lists as well as data cleaning, data appending, and data maintenance services. Paul Gillen Communications. You can see Paul is a popular speaker and an award-winning author who can define the value and the pitfalls of social media in plain business terms. And Solo Segment, your one-stop shop for targeted B2B content marketing techniques, including website search and web personalization. Now on to your questions. Paul, in today's digital world, how do I figure out which journalists are worth reaching?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I would say start with who your client believes is credible. If your client understands the market, then they probably are reading the journals that matter to them. So they're going to have a pretty good idea of who resonates with your audience. I would also say your clients' customers should be a source as well. So your client, so run a small poll or even call up 10 of your clients' customers and ask them what sources of news matter the most to them. And that will get you a short list you should start with. I think as you learn the lay of the land, you will probably find other sources. But the important thing is, what do your customers read?
That makes a ton of sense, Paul. So next question, it's getting harder and harder to get attention and break through the clutter. Is there anything you would suggest that gets attention?
Research is good. We get a lot of research these days. Most of the research I get is not very good. It's a 100, 200 person poll. Essentially, someone puts up a SurveyMonkey a questionnaire and blasts out an email and hopes for the best. I don't do much with those. I do look for surveys that have a good-sized respondent base, several hundred respondents at least, ideally with a qualified qualifier such as a title or a market size. I look for something that is a provocative topic, something that is timely, related to an issue that's in the news, or something that tells me something I don't know that's not intuitively obvious. Probably that's one of the best ways. For me, one of the best ways to get my attention is with your customers. If you can put a customer in front of me who will do the talking. I love talking to customers. They're honest. They're transparent. We can talk about all kinds of things that are not related to your product that are interesting to me. So I've often told people almost the closest way to get a story in SiliconANGLE from me is to give me a good customer story. So those are two ideas that will resonate with me. I think also product reviews and saying something that's different. Coming at it at a topic with an angle that's unique and perhaps orthogonal to the conventional wisdom is another way to get my attention.
Terrific advice. That's great stuff, Paul. Time for one more question. Let's see. I'm a PR person, and these are great tips. How do I know which new social media venues are worth focusing on and which ones I can safely ignore?
Well, I think if for B2B, I would look at the vertical portals. The ones like the one that Google just bought, which I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's a crowdsourced coding site for data scientists, which is very popular with people in the data science community. There are professional networks for doctors, for radiologists. Aunt Minnie for radiologists is an interesting one. For people in all kinds, for truckers, for people in all kinds of vertical professions. In fact, there is a website, Leader Networks, Leader Networks. Vanessa DeMoro's site has a wonderful list of B2B communities that you can look at, which will help you find some of these areas that have, I've found, really excellent stickiness with the professionals that they target, and are not are out of the public eye because they are so vertical, but they have great authority with the B2B professionals you're trying to reach.
That's a terrific tip, Paul. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Paul, thank you so much for these great ideas, and thanks especially to our audience for your participation and your questions. If any of you had questions we didn't have time to answer, you can email your questions to Eileen, E-I-L-E-E-N, @MikeMoran.com, and she'll be sure to get them to Paul for the answer. Later this week, we'll send you all a link to the recording of this webinar to listen to again and to share with others. We also invite you to mark your calendars for our next Biznology webinar, How to Build Your Social Selling System with LinkedIn and Twitter, given by Mindy Rosser at 11 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time on July 18th. We hope to see everybody back there back then. Bye, everybody.